I never expected to leave city life behind for a job in the middle of nowhere, but when the opportunity came to be the winter caretaker at the Whispering Pines Resort in Montana, something in me said yes. I was tired of the noise, the constant movement, and the hollow company of strangers. I wanted silence, maybe even solitude, and that place offered exactly that. The job description had sounded simple: maintain the lodge, keep the heat running, make sure the pipes don't freeze, and above all, follow the rules in the caretaker's handbook. It was a private resort nestled deep in the Bitterroot Mountains, closed to the public during winter. I'd be alone for 5 months. No guests, no staff, just me in the snow-covered wilderness. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sun already starting to slip behind the peaks. The drive up the narrow, winding mountain road had been treacherous. Ice lined every turn, and the trees hung low, whispering in the cold wind. My tires crunched the fresh snow as I pulled into the main clearing. There it stood, the Whispering Pines Lodge, 3 stories of rustic wood and stone, surrounded by 7 private cabins, all dark and lifeless for the season. I stepped out of the car and was immediately swallowed by the stillness. No birds, no rustling of animals, just the wind sliding through the tall pine trees like a voice just below hearing. I felt small, like I had crossed into a place the world forgot. I was greeted by Mr. Jensen, the property manager. He was a stiff, narrow man in his 60s, with eyes that never blinked long and hands that didn't shake when he handed me the keys. He gave me a quick tour: the boiler room, the food storage cellar, the communications cabin where the satellite radio and generator controls were located, and finally, the main lodge where I'd be staying. He didn't talk much, just the essentials. But before he left, he handed me a black leather-bound book. "This is the caretaker's handbook," he said. "Keep it close, and no matter what happens, follow the rules, all of them." I chuckled a little, trying to make light of it. "What happens if I don't?" His eyes lingered on mine for a long moment. "Just don't find out." Then he left. I watched his SUV disappear down the long, narrow road, the only way in or out. It would be snowed in within days, he'd told me. After that, I'd be completely cut off, except for the emergency radio. I carried my bags into the main lodge and lit the fireplace in the grand lounge. The lodge was beautiful, even in the dimming light: vaulted ceilings, leather furniture, antique rugs, and the constant creaking of old wood. It felt like stepping back in time. Later that night, I opened the handbook. The first few pages were standard: emergency procedures, contact information, generator operation, snow clearing protocol. But as I flipped further, the rules became caretaker rules. Whispering Pines Resort, winter season. 1. Do not enter cabin number 3 under any circumstances. 2. At exactly 2:34 a.m. each night, check the main hallway mirror. If you see your reflection, proceed. If you don't, do not move until sunrise. 3. Always lock the main lodge door before midnight, even if you are outside, especially if you are outside. 4. If you hear knocking from inside the fireplace, do not investigate. 5. Once a week, leave an offering of salt and honey on the back porch. Do not look back when you walk away. 6. Never respond to voices calling your name from the woods. 7. The piano in the lounge will play at 3:17 a.m. Do not acknowledge it. 8. You may see guests in the dining hall. There are no guests. Ignore them. 9. If the resort phone rings after midnight, do not answer. 10. Burn the final page of this book at the end of your stay. I closed the book and stared into the fire for a long time. It had to be a joke, or maybe just one of those eerie traditions passed down by superstitious staff. Resorts like these loved their folklore, probably some sort of initiation. But I couldn't shake how serious Jensen had been. That night, I barely slept. The wind howled outside like it had teeth. I kept imagining footsteps in the hallway, soft creaks on the floorboards, the sound of a piano key pressed by an invisible finger. Of course, none of that happened, not yet. The next morning, I busied myself, cleared the snow from the entryway, did a round of the cabins, all locked and sealed for the season, checked the generator, made sure the food stores were secure. It was all fine, normal, except for cabin number 3. It looked no different from the others. Small wooden porch, shutters drawn, chimneyed with frost, but something about it felt wrong. The air around it was colder. The snow didn't crunch under my boots quite the same. And when I got closer, I noticed the padlock on the door was old, rusted, and thick, like it had been placed there not for security, but containment. I didn't get too close. I didn't want to. That evening I made dinner, lit the fire again, and watched the snow fall outside the wide lodge windows. The silence was heavier than I expected. Every crack in the wood felt like a whisper. Every flicker of shadow outside made me wonder if something had moved. I went to bed early. Sleep came slow, and then I woke up. At 2:34 a.m., something stirred me from sleep. I didn't hear a sound, didn't feel a jolt. I just woke, suddenly fully, and sat upright in bed. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed with those exact numbers. I remembered the rule. Check the main hallway mirror. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But something compelled me. Not fear exactly, more like gravity. I walked barefoot across the cold wooden floor, through the quiet lodge, down the hallway to the large, ornate mirror hanging near the stairwell. And there I stood. My reflection was there as it should be. Pale, tired, but mine. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But then I saw it. In the corner behind me, deep in the mirror's reflection, was a small shape. Sitting in the lounge by the fire. A figure. I turned instantly. The room behind me was empty. Nothing by the fire. No sound. No shadow. I turned back to the mirror. The shape was gone. I walked back to my room, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. Just fatigue. Just nerves. But as I passed the dining hall, something stopped me cold. The piano. One single key. Played softly. Just once. Then silence. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. And slowly I backed away. I didn't sleep again that night. After the mirror incident and the piano note, I sat in the armchair in my room, watching the door until the pale light of dawn began to seep through the frost-covered windows. The lodge was eerily still, as if it had exhaled and decided not to breathe again until the sun was fully up. When the clock hit 7 a.m., I finally moved. I went down to the kitchen and made myself a strong pot of coffee. My hands trembled as I poured. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure again, the one I swore I saw in the mirror. But the day passed uneventfully. The world outside the resort was covered in deep snow, thick and untouched, like no one had ever walked here before. Even the trees, tall and ancient, looked frozen in prayer. I took a walk to clear my head, visiting each cabin again, avoiding cabin number 3 deliberately. A few ravens sat silently on the branches above, watching me as I moved. They didn't caw, they just stared. By the time I returned to the main lodge, the air had already begun to dim. Sunset came early here, and fast. I started the fire early, then opened the handbook again. I reread the rules slowly. They were the same, but something about them felt heavier now, like the words knew I was beginning to believe them. Rule 2 had proven itself real. I hadn't imagined that feeling. And the piano? Rule 7 warned about it. Do not acknowledge it. But I had. I had stopped. I had listened. Was that all it took? Breaking the rule by mere attention? I spent the evening trying to act normal. Cooked dinner, read a few pages of an old paperback I found on the bookshelf, and listened to the wind. But when the clock neared midnight, I stood up and went to the front door. Rule 3. Always lock the main lodge door before midnight, even if you are outside, especially if you are outside. The door was already locked, but I turned the bolt again anyway. My fingers hesitated on the cold metal. Why especially if I was outside? The wind howled louder now. Something about it had changed. It no longer sounded like mere weather. It carried a kind of voice. Not words, but tones of emotion. Sadness, hunger, memory. I stood at the front door a long time, watching the snow swirl through the glass panes. That's when I saw something move. It wasn't close, maybe 100 feet from the lodge, but there was a figure there, standing, still. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and it was gone. I didn't open the door. I didn't go outside. Instead, I backed away slowly, rough heart hammering in my chest. Just the wind, I told myself. The isolation was messing with my head. That was all. But deep down, I knew better. The clock read 12:06 a.m. I sat in the lounge facing the fireplace, firelight flickering across the wooden walls. That's when the knocking began. Soft at first, hollow, from inside the fireplace. Rule 4. If you hear knocking from inside the fireplace, do not investigate. I froze. It knocked again. 3 times. Deliberate. Rhythmic. I stared at the flames, watching them dance. The knocking came again, louder this time. I wanted to move. I wanted to run. But I stayed glued to the chair, heart pounding like it might burst from my ribs. Then it stopped. No more knocking, just silence. And then, soft footsteps above me. I looked up. The floor above creaked slowly, as if someone was walking across the master suite. But I hadn't been up there. That entire floor was empty. At least it should have been. I stood up carefully and grabbed the flashlight. I didn't turn it on yet. I waited, listened. The steps had stopped. I went to the bottom of the staircase and looked up. The hallway above was dark, no movement. Still, I climbed the steps one by one. They groaned under my weight. At the top, I flicked on the flashlight. The beam swept across the hallway, lighting the closed doors. I checked each one, empty, silent, normal, until I reached the last room at the end of the hall, the master suite. The door was open an inch. I don't remember opening it. I pushed it slowly. The room was exactly as I'd left it during my tour, untouched. A large bed, stone fireplace, bookshelf, and an antique dresser with a mirror. That mirror, it was cracked now. A jagged line ran across the center like it had been struck. But I knew it hadn't been like that before. I stepped closer. The room smelled faintly of smoke and something older, like burnt wood and dried blood. In the mirror, for a fraction of a second, I saw something move behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I didn't sleep in my bed that night. I stayed downstairs, wrapped in a blanket by the fire, staring at the flames, waiting for 2:34 a.m. When the time came, I walked to the hallway mirror again. My reflection was there. This time, no figure behind me. But as I turned to leave, the mirror cracked. Right in front of me. A clean, slicing noise. A diagonal line, no fresh and glistening, as if the glass had bled. I stumbled back. Suddenly the lodge felt too quiet, too still. Then I heard it again, the piano. A slow, deliberate melody this time. Not just one note. A song I didn't recognize. But I felt it deep in my bones like it was calling something I had forgotten. I clenched my fists and walked to the edge of the lounge. The piano keys moved on their own, slowly, deliberately. No one was there. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't move. Eventually, the playing stopped. The fire died down. The cold pressed in harder than before. And I realized I hadn't made the offering yet. Rule 5, once a week, leave an offering of salt and honey on the back porch. Do not look back when you walk away. I scrambled to the pantry and found both. I poured the salt carefully into a small wooden bowl and drizzled honey over it. My hands were shaking, but I carried it to the back porch, opened the door, and set it down. I didn't look back. I walked slowly, deliberately into the lodge and closed the door. I locked it, and I breathed again. But I swear I heard whispering behind me as I shut the door. Soft. Grateful. Or was it hungry? By the time the third morning arrived, the snow had swallowed the landscape completely. It was impossible to tell where the land ended and the sky began. Everything was blank, cold, white, and still. I hadn't seen another human in 3 days, and I didn't expect to. The road was long gone beneath 6 feet of snow, and even the satellite radio gave only a dull static when I tried it the previous night. But something else was happening now, something deeper than isolation. The lodge wasn't just quiet, it was watching. There was a constant feeling in my bones, like I wasn't alone in this place. The rooms echoed strangely, even when I whispered. My footsteps seemed slower than they should be, like the air didn't want me moving through it. Time felt soft, folding around itself, blurring hours together. And the mirror, the one in the hallway, it cracked again. This time from the opposite corner. Another slash like a wound across the glass. It had now formed an X, 2 intersecting scars. I didn't check it at 2:34 a.m. that night. I was too afraid of what I might see. But the rules didn't say I could skip it. I didn't think it would matter until the wind changed. That night, it wasn't just howling, it was whispering. Low, frantic murmurs swirled around the lodge. The trees outside trembled, not from the cold, but from something moving through them. I pressed my face to the frosted glass and peered out into the moonlit dark. Something ran between the trees, not fast, not animal-like. It walked upright, but its movements were all wrong, like it didn't understand how limbs were supposed to bend. I closed the curtains. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the piano played again, louder, faster. This time the melody was discordant, angry. The keys clattered like someone was slamming them. I buried my face in my hands and stayed on the floor of the hallway. I didn't look. I didn't move. And eventually it stopped. But then came the voice, from deep in the forest, calling my name. soft at first, like a friend, like someone I knew. I stood up, walked cautiously to the front door, and leaned toward it. The voice called again. Aaron! My name, spoken in a tone so familiar it nearly broke me. It was my mother's voice, but my mother had died 2 years ago. I turned away from the door immediately. Rule 6. Never respond to voices calling your name from the woods. I shoved pillows into my ears and curled beneath the blanket on the lounge floor, trying to drown it out. I chanted to myself, over and over, it isn't real. It isn't real. It isn't real. But the voice persisted. It shifted from my mother's tone to others, my sister, an old friend, even my own voice. That last one sent chills deep into my spine. It was like the forest knew how to crawl into the cracks of my soul. At dawn, everything stopped. The voice vanished. The wind calmed. The forest fell silent again. I stumbled to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, pale skin, cracked lips. I looked like I'd aged 10 years. Later that afternoon, I ventured outside again. I needed air. I needed to feel the cold on my face, to remember I was still alive. As I walked past the cabins, I realized something strange. The snow around cabin 3 was gone. The other cabins were buried in it, frozen steps, snowbanks curling up the sides. But cabin 3, the ground was bare, bone dry. I approached slowly. My boots sank in the surrounding snow, but as soon as I stepped onto the clearing around the cabin, the snow stopped. I could hear only my breath. There was something written on the door now, carved deep into the wood. It's not locked anymore. My stomach twisted. The padlock was gone. Not broken, not discarded, just missing. The handle to the cabin door shifted ever so slightly as the wind pressed against it. I didn't dare open it. I turned back, walked away, fast, not running, but close, and never looked over my shoulder. That night, I didn't wait for the rules to test me again. I followed them all, every single one. Locked the front door before midnight. Checked the hallway mirror at 2:34 a.m. My reflection was there this time. No cracks appeared, no shadows. I returned to my room and wrapped myself tightly in my blanket facing the wall. But something had followed me back. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the piano didn't just play, it screamed. The keys banged with such violence that I thought they'd shatter. I heard wood splinter, the bench slam over. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. But it wasn't just the piano this time. I heard footsteps dragging across the lounge. Not walking, dragging. And they stopped right outside my door. I heard breathing, low like an animal. It didn't knock. It didn't whisper. It just waited. I pressed my hands over my mouth, heart thundering in my chest. After what felt like hours, the breathing faded. The steps dragged away, and then silence. Just before sunrise, I opened the door. There was a line of salt across the threshold. I never placed it there, but something had. A gift, or a warning. Later, when I returned to the lounge, I found the piano bench upright again. And this time, someone had placed a glass of water on top of it. The glass was warm to the touch, and inside it floated a single pine needle, burnt black. The next morning felt wrong. It wasn't just the uneasy silence or the untouched snow outside. It was the way the air moved inside the lodge, too heavy, like it was full of breath that wasn't mine. The wooden walls, once warm and welcoming, now pressed in as if they were listening. I hadn't slept, not truly. I kept my eyes shut, yes, but my mind stayed awake, wide open, waiting for that dragging noise to return. It didn't. Not that night, but something else did. It began in the dining hall. At first I thought I'd imagined it, a soft clink of silverware, the faint scrape of a chair leg across the wood floor. I froze in the hallway, holding a cup of stale coffee, and just listened. Silence. Then again, clink. A fork, maybe. Gentle, casual. I slowly stepped toward the dining area, careful not to let the floor creak beneath me. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I peeked through the doorway, and my heart nearly stopped. The long dining table, which had remained untouched for days, was now set for a full meal. Plates, wine glasses, cutlery polished and perfectly aligned. 7 seats spaced evenly. But no one had been here. I hadn't done this. The kitchen was locked, and I had the only key. I hadn't cooked. I hadn't served. I hadn't even been in this room since the tour. The chair at the head of the table moved, by itself, just an inch, like someone had just stood up from it. Rule 8. You may see guests in the dining hall. There are no guests. Ignore them. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what might be sitting there, staring at me, frozen in a moment of dining that should never have begun. That entire day, the temperature inside the lodge dropped, despite the fire roaring constantly. I wore layers of jackets, thermal socks, gloves. Nothing helped. The cold wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It wanted in. By sunset, I'd had enough. I decided to do a full inspection of the lodge, top to bottom, every hallway, every room, every closet. I needed to feel in control again. The top floor was undisturbed. The cracked mirror hadn't grown. No more slashes. The master bedroom still smelled faintly of burnt wood. On the second floor, I found nothing unusual until I reached the last room on the west wing. I hadn't opened that one yet. I'd assumed it was just another unused guest room. But as I turned the handle, something stopped me. There was humming inside. Soft. Female. A lullaby, maybe. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like it was right behind the door. I let go of the handle, backed away, and moved on. The handbook didn't mention humming, but I trusted my gut by now. I returned to the communications cabin outside around dusk to check the generator. The wind was fierce, whipping through the trees like wolves screaming in the night. When I opened the metal door to the small hut, I found the generator humming smoothly, but the emergency phone light was blinking. A call had come through. Rule 9. If the resort phone rings after midnight, do not answer. It hadn't rung, but I checked the call log anyway. Just one entry. Incoming call, 12:46 a.m., no caller ID. I stepped away from the device like it might burn me. I didn't touch anything else. I left the cabin and trudged through the deep snow back to the lodge, the wind biting at my face. That night, I set another bowl of salt and honey on the back porch. I still didn't know what it did, or who it was for, but every time I placed the offering, the wind calmed. Just slightly, and that was enough for me to keep doing it. Inside, the piano was quiet for once. No music, no dragging footsteps. It almost felt calm, but that didn't last. At exactly 2:34 a.m., I stood in front of the hallway mirror again. My reflection stared back, but this time it didn't match me. I was standing still, breathing shallowly, but the reflection blinked differently. It moved half a second behind. Its head tilted when mine didn't. I reached up to touch my face. So did it. But the timing was off. I took one step back. The reflection smiled. I didn't. Then it vanished, just blinked out of the mirror, leaving behind only the dark hallway reflected behind me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stood there, every muscle frozen in place, my mind trying to unravel what I'd seen. The mirror remained empty for nearly a full minute before my reflection reappeared. Normal this time. I went back to the lounge, shaking, cold sweat running down my back, despite the fire. And that's when I heard the guests, voices from the dining hall, laughter, conversation, clinking glasses. I didn't go check. I followed the rule, but I sat near the hallway, listening, and what I heard wasn't comforting. There were 7 distinct voices, all cheerful, talking about things that didn't make sense, time periods long past, names I didn't recognize. One voice stood out. It sounded like mine. I pressed my hands to my ears and curled into the couch, whispering, "They're not real. They're not real." But the worst part came next. The voices stopped all at once. Chairs slid back from the table, and then I heard footsteps approaching the lounge. They didn't run. They walked slowly, deliberately. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I kept my eyes shut tight. The air shifted, grew colder. I felt a presence behind me, standing there, watching. It stayed for what felt like hours. Then it was gone. In the morning, I returned to the dining hall. Everything was clean. No dishes, no chairs out of place, just dust and silence. As if nothing had ever happened. Except one thing had changed. On the plate at the head of the table sat a folded piece of parchment. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a message, scrawled in black ink. "Cabin number 3 is waiting." I stared at the note for a long time. Cabin 3 is waiting. I didn't know who left it. I didn't know when, but I knew what it meant. For days I'd followed the rules. I'd locked doors, ignored voices, honored rituals I didn't understand. I'd been careful, respectful, cautious. But the resort wasn't satisfied anymore. It wanted more. It wanted me. By mid-afternoon, the sky had turned the color of iron. Snow fell thick again, smothering the trees in silence. The cold had sharpened into something unnatural. Even the fire couldn't keep the frost at bay anymore. Every breath I exhaled fogged instantly, even indoors. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the property, checking the cabins like I had on the first day. Cabins 1, 2, and 4 through 7 were still sealed under snow, untouched. But cabin number 3, the path to it had been cleared. No footprints, no tracks, just a long, open trail of hard-packed snow like something had crawled or slithered through. The door stood half open. I considered turning back. I considered calling for help, packing what I could, or locking myself in the generator cabin. But none of those were real options. I knew, somewhere deep inside, that this wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about finishing something. I took a flashlight and the leather-bound caretaker's handbook with me. I don't know why. Maybe for protection. Maybe for comfort. The snow crunched under my boots as I stepped onto the trail. The closer I got, the heavier the air became. My ears popped. My breath hitched. The trees around cabin number 3 didn't sway like the others. They stood still, rigid, as if frozen mid-scream. And though there was no wind, I could still hear a distant whispering. I reached the porch. The door creaked wider on its own. Inside, the cabin was completely dark. I flicked on the flashlight. The beam swept over a simple wooden table, 2 chairs, and a fireplace, just like the lodge. But someone was already sitting at the table. Or something. It looked like a man, hunched and still, face hidden in shadow. As I stepped closer, it lifted its head slowly, and I gasped. It was me, or a version of me. Same face, same coat, same exhausted eyes, but wrong. Its skin was paler, lips cracked and blackened, and where my eyes should have reflected fear, his were hollow, bottomless. He spoke without moving his mouth. "You broke the rules." I shook my head, stepping back. "No, I followed them." It tilted its head. "You looked at the piano. You paused when the mirror cracked. You heard the voices. You doubted. The lodge saw. The lodge knows." I opened the handbook in panic, flipping through it for something, anything that might help. But the pages were now blank. Every one, except the last. The final page read, "You cannot leave until you replace yourself." I looked up. The other me had risen from the chair. His movements were strange, stiff like a puppet pulled by strings. He walked toward me, slowly, barefoot on the wooden floor, his breath puffing black mist into the air. "I'm tired," he said, voice now his own. My own. "I've been here a long time, watching, keeping the rules, feeding the resort." I backed up toward the door. "I don't want to stay," I whispered. "You already have," he replied. He raised his hand, and in it he held the keys to the lodge. My keys. Then he stepped forward and placed them in my palm. "You're the caretaker now," he said. "I'm free." Before I could respond, the flashlight flickered violently, then went out. Total darkness swallowed me. I don't remember falling, but I woke up hours later on the lodge couch, the fire crackling quietly beside me. The storm outside had passed. The resort was silent again. I sat up slowly, dazed. Something was different. I reached into my pocket, found the keys still there. I walked to the hallway mirror. My reflection stared back, calm and hollow-eyed. No cracks now, only me. Exactly as I looked, exactly where I stood. But I didn't feel like myself anymore. I didn't feel alone anymore. In the days that followed, nothing else strange happened. No music at 3:17 a.m., no voices in the woods, no footsteps or mirrors cracking. Just quiet, too quiet. The resort had what it wanted, and I finally understood the rules weren't to protect me. They were to transform me, to turn me into part of Whispering Pines. The offerings, the mirror test, the silent guests, these weren't threats. They were rituals, preparations. One night I sat in the lounge, the fire burning low, and heard footsteps on the porch. I didn't panic. I didn't check the rules. I already knew what was coming. Someone knocked on the door twice. Then a pause. Then a third knock. I opened the handbook. The pages had filled in again. New handwriting. Neat. Sharp. A new list of rules. Caretaker rules. Whispering Pines Resort Winter Season. 1. Do not answer the door after dark. 2. If the mirror ever shows someone smiling, cover it for the night. 3. Never go near cabin number 3. It is no longer safe. 4. Keep the fire burning. Always. 5. At sunrise on the 11th of each month, bury salt at the base of the tallest pine. 6. If anyone else arrives, give them the book. 7. When it's your time, replace yourself. I closed the handbook gently. The knocking stopped. I didn't move. The fire burned, and outside, the pines whispered my name.